Hey, I'm J Loren Norris, and I'm here to read with you today through our King James Version of the Bible. We're going to start in Genesis 37 and go through the end of 41. So join with me, if you will, Genesis chapter 37. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto the father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him. They could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood around about it, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed another dream, and he told it to his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream. Behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this thou shalt dream? What have you dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? And his brethren envied him. And his brethren went to feed the flock, the father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, Here am I. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, and see whether it is well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him off to the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where do they feed their flocks? And the man said, Thou art departed hence, for I heard them saying, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said to one another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we'll see what would become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into the pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him, and they cast him into the pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in the pit. And they sat down to eat bread. And they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, and going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us tell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and brethren, we're content. Then there passed the Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Israelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his clothes, And he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat, and they killed a goat, and they dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, this we have found. Now we know not whether it's thy son has coat or no. And he knew it, and he said, it is my son's coat, and the evil beast hath devoured him. And Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes, and put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He said, for I will go down into the grave, my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him unto Egypt, unto Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh, and a captain of the guard. In chapter 38. And it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren, and turned into a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. And he took her, and he went unto her. And she conceived and bare a son, and called his name And she conceived again, and bare a son, and called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again, and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And when he was at Shezeb, when she bare him, and Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. And Judah said unto Onan, go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up a seed to thy brother. And Onan knew her, that the seed should not be his. And it came to pass, that when he went in to his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. Then said Judah to Tamar his daughter-in-law, remain a widow at thy father's house, till Shelah my son be grown. For he said, lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. And in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted, and went up unto the sheep shearers in Timnath, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she put off her widow's garment from her, and covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is by the way to Timnath. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned unto her by the way, and said, go to, I pray thee, let me come into thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what wilt thou give me, that thou mayest come in to me? And he said, I will give thee a kid from the flock. And she said, wilt thou give me a pledge until thou send it? And he said, what pledge shall I give thee? She said, thy signet, and thy bracelets, and thy staff that is in thine hand. And he gave it to her, and he came into her, and conceived by him. As she arose and went away, and laid by her veil from her, put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah set a kid by the hand of the friend of the Adullamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand. But he found her not. Then he asked the men of the place, saying, where is the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said, there is no harlot in this place. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said, there is no harlot in this place. And Judah said, let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and thou hast not found her. And it came to pass about 3 months after, that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and also, behold, is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, bring her forth, and let her be burnt. When she was brought forth, she said to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are, am I with child? And she said, discern, I pray thee, whose are these the signet, and the bracelets, and the staff? And Judah acknowledged them, and said, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not Shelah my son. and he knew her again no more. And it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were born in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed, that one put out his hand, and the midwife took it and bound upon it a scarlet thread, saying, This one came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. And she said, How hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez. And afterward came out his brother, that had been the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Chapter 39. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him out of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down hither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had put his hand to. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. And it came to pass that after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, she said, Lie with me. But he refused, and he said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house, neither than I. Neither hath he put anything back from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, and to lie by her, to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went to the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and he fled, and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and she spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard it, that I lifted up my voice, he cried. He left his garment with me, and he fled, and got him out. And she laid upon his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass that as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment with me, and he fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake to him, after this manner did thy servant serve me, this wrath was kindled. Joseph's master took him, put him in the prison, and placed him where the king's prisoners were bound. And he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all that the prisoners were in the prison, and whatsoever they did, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not on anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him. And that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Chapter 40. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth with them, the two of his officers, against the chief of the butler and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in a ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and he continued to serve in the ward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. The butler and the baker were bound in the prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning, and he looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream unto Joseph, and said to him, In my dream, behold, there was a vine. A vine was before me. And the vine were 3 branches, and it was, though it budded, and the blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And the Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and I pressed them into the Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup to the Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of the dream. 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head, and restore thee unto the place thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, and after the former manner when thou wast his butler. But think on me, and it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I was in a dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there were all manner of bakements for the Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat the flesh off of thee. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was the Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup to the Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had interpreted them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgat him again.
Welcome to Fear into Faith. My name is Summer Day, and I get to be in the studio today with Mr. J Loren Norris.
Thank you for having me, Summer.
I'm really glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to be a part of this TV show and being one of our readers. You know, you and I have been friends for a little while now, and I've seen you speak on stages, and you have one of those really powerful voices, so I was excited to hear you read the Word of God.
Thank you.
What was that like for you today?
There's a lot of big words. And a lot of names that we don't use in America on a regular basis.
Yes, but you did a great job.
Well, thank you.
You sounded well, my friend. You did. I know that you weren't anticipating having to do the King James version with some of those words. But
some of the words, some of the names, some of the sentence patterns. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought better you than me.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Look out for that bus! Yeah.
Well, I actually know a lot about you from the business perspective. I know you're a speaker coach, but I haven't really got to unpack your sort of journey with the Lord. So I think let's start there. Let's reverse back in time. And were you born and raised, with strong faith?
I was born and raised in what you would consider a religious understanding of faith.
Okay.
By that I mean I was raised in a small town in Central Texas where most people think if you're not born a cow, you're born a Christian.
If you're not born a cow, you are born.
If you're human, you're probably.
I've not heard this before.
Yeah.
I actually just recently relocated to Texas.
Yeah.
And you live in Texas. Thank you. We really like it here. The people are amazing. And so you've said that essentially the belief in Texas was if you're not born
a cow, you're born a Christian.
A cow, you're born a Christian.
Yeah.
Okay. I've not heard that. Let's go on.
Southern Baptist, right? So I recently heard a pastor, Robert Morris of Gateway, he said, there's a difference between conception and incubation and birth.
Okay.
And so the way I would have told you before I heard that theory, I would have said, well, I was born again at 9 years old, and then I kind of fell off the wagon. So I gave my life to Christ at 9. Didn't really give it up. I just kind of took what he offered. But that happened because I was in a little church in Enid, Oklahoma, and my stepdad was very abusive. And I heard the preacher say, it was I was making paper airplanes with gum wrappers, right?
Yes.
I'm not really paying attention.
What 9-year-old boys are usually doing.
I wasn't paying any attention to the message. But I heard him say, if you need a best friend who will stick closer than a brother, come up here and meet my friend Jesus.
That's good.
I had no brother. I had no friends. I had an abusive stepfather, and I was looking for any dude that really wanted to hang out with me. And so I went up there, accepted Christ at 9 years old, had no idea what I was doing. Over the next 6 to 9 months, though, I won every Bible drill. I was there every time the doors were open until my stepfather said, "You'll never go back to that building as long as I can help it." And the day that I got baptized, there was none of my family in the audience. But I remember that day after the service was over, everybody was shaking hands with the pastor, Brother Byron O'Neill. He's standing on the edge of the platform, and I climbed up on the platform, pushed him off the platform, and when he turned around, we were eye to eye. And I looked him in the eye and said, "One of these days, Brother O'Neill, I'm going to take your place."
Wow.
Now, the real irony is you can fast forward about 20 years, and a girl that I was seeing at the time was from Oklahoma, and her family lived just miles down the road from Enid, which I hadn't revisited since we left when my stepdad died. And I looked up Brother Byron O'Neill, and we went to his house. And he not only remembered that, he had written it in his Bible, and he was the only person I know that saved the obituary of my stepfather.
Wow.
And so when I went to see him, he handed me that, and he said, "There's been a calling on your life as long as I've known you. I just wish I'd been able to keep in touch with you and disciple you." But I went as far from the kingdom as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as you can imagine. If there's something you could do wrong, I found a way to do it.
Wow. Well, I want to know more about when you saw him. I feel like you left us hanging a little bit on that story.
It was a really interesting thing. It was almost like a coming full circle.
Yeah.
So the meeting, we drove 2.5 hours to get to his apartment. We walked in the door. We sat with him for probably 10 minutes. He was old and frail and feeble, but he remembered me as sharp as a tack. Remembered the day that my stepdad said, "Don't come back here." And it was because, and I hearken back now when I think about it, Tony Robbins, his whole story started when his stepfather refused to accept a free turkey for Thanksgiving. Well, we were asked to leave we were told to get out of the church by my stepfather because someone from the church gave shoes to my sister.
Oh, wow.
So very similar kind of
Yeah.
wrathful heart.
Yeah.
And so that really sparked an interesting journey for me. But it was shortly after that I was molested as a 9-year-old boy. And I spent the next 25 years addicted to pornography as a result. Like I said, I ran as far from God as I possibly could.
Wow.
It wasn't until basic training that I'd fallen in love for as much as you can at 19 years old, just before going into basic training.
Yeah.
And I was writing her letters and trying to call her. And when I called one time, her grandmother picked up the phone and said, "She never wants to talk to you again," and hung up on me. And so I was devastated.
Yeah.
I had joined the Air Force because my high school sweetheart broke up with me. And when I called her, she was like, "Who is this?" And I'm like, "What? We've been together 3 years. How do you not know my name?" And so it was just a collision after collision of relying on people and finding that I couldn't trust them. And so I'm writing a letter to this girl to say, I want to fix this. And it kept turning into a poem. And I would get mad. I would wad them up and throw them I'd start again. And I'd get to the point. And when I realized that they ended the same every time, I started pulling them out and laying them onto the bed next to each other. And that day, I had been made dorm chief over our flight in basic training. And I'm reading these stanzas. Every man in the room is crying. Day 9 is kind of the breaking point where they've shaved your head. They've taken away your identity. Everybody's lost.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to everybody in the room has the same emotional sense that I do right now. It was so bizarre. But all of these letters ended in the same couple of lines. I need somebody to lean on that no matter how hard I lean, they don't turn their back on me. And it was like instantly an epiphany of Jesus leaning against the wall, arms crossed, not like judgment, but like, I'm waiting.
Wow.
And the words he said to me were, "I never turned my back on you. You turned your back on me."
Wow.
And so I guess for lack of a better word, I repented right then. And I said, "Let's do this then." And I stood up and I turned around to the rest of the group and I said, every one of you are crying for the same reason. But I'd like to lead us in the Lord's Prayer. It was the only thing I knew.
Wow.
And so I led the room in the Lord's Prayer. I don't know how long you've been in Texas or how many times you've been in Texas, but it tends to get a little toasty. I saw a Facebook post today that somebody ran into Abednego at the 7-Eleven. I wouldn't be at all surprised. Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. Anyway, it gets really hot. And so September the 30th of 1988
Yeah.
was when I went into basic training. So 9 days into that. And I said, let's pray. And this cold wind blew through the windows.
Wow.
You would have thought somebody dropped the temperature 50 degrees. Every man that was already in bed pulled the blanket up to his neck.
Mm-hmm.
The crying ceased.
Mm.
And after we said the Lord's Prayer, our flight did that every night until we graduated.
Oh my gosh.
And we became an honor flight. And it was as different as daylight and dark from the first 8 days of our basic training.
Wow. And do you still keep in contact with any of those men?
None of them.
None of them.
Not one.
But I guarantee you there was a seed planted. I'm praying one of them watches this interview and it's like, Mr. J Loren, I need to get you on the phone. I want to go back to when you got to meet that pastor.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what that was like for you and how that started to change your life.
I'll be honest and tell you, I was ignorant at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a whole lot of arrogance and pride in me. And, you know, I felt like I did something for him to go back and see him.
And you know what else? I just realized it's time for us actually to go on a commercial break, which is perfect to leave everybody hanging. And you shared a lot that we're going to unpack when we come back.
Kinky, curly, wavy, straight, no matter what texture of hair you have, your hair is uniquely you and can shine in its natural beauty. And you don't have to use harsh chemicals that hurt your hair to do it. Hair Rules has exactly what you need. Our non-toxic, nourishing blend of ingredients help you work with your unique hair texture and not against it. You've got beautiful and unique hair. It's time to start showing it. Visit ilovemytexture.com and treat your hair the way it deserves. Your choice, your hair, your rules. ilovemytexture.com.
So we're back with J Loren Norris, and we're going to hear more of his testimony, kind of how he fell away from the Lord for a while, and then you're back now and on fire for Jesus, you might say. I was asking you about that moment where you went back to the pastor's house, and you said actually you were kind of ignorant of how powerful the moment was.
I look back on it now, and I have a better understanding.
Yeah.
Let me give you a contrast for an example. So I was 2 years into my Air Force career at the time. I had gotten to my first base, gone through all the journey there, and at my first base fell in love, right? Because that's what we all do. So I fell in love with this girl, and you know, we had a wild, crazy relationship, and we had agreed that we were going to get married so she could go to overseas with me when I got the assignment to go overseas. And her dad said, just wait, and if you'll hold off, I'll pay for everything. Of course, I wasn't smart enough to know the bride's father's supposed to pay for everything anyway. So I was like, yes, he's going to pay for everything. I thought it was a big like lottery win or something. But the contrast, I went home on leave and I'm walking into the grocery store. It's the biggest thing in our town, about 5,000, most of those cows. And so in this little town, as I'm walking to the grocery store, my aunt works there and mom wasn't at home and mom wasn't at the school. There's only one other place to be in town. That's the grocery store talking to her sister.
Okay.
And so I pull up in front, I get the front parking space, I park my Firebird there. I step out in my dress blue uniform with my badge on my chest and feeling really powerful and important in this tiny little town. And I walk through the door, I find her, she's checking out. So I'm just waiting at the end of the register. And this kid comes running from all the way across the room. He's probably 14 or 15 years old. Sprints across the front of the grocery store. Everybody's turning to look at him. It's like this moment on the beach, like the unrequited love finally returns home kind of thing. And I don't have a brother and I don't have a son. And so who's this kid, right? And so he runs and he jumps and he hugs me around the neck and he looks at me and he looks me up and down. And I'm so proud of myself for all that I've accomplished coming from a small town to be in the Air Force. And he says, I want to be just like you when I grow up. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. High five, right? And I'm thinking back to the contrast of that moment with the preacher in his little apartment and him in his wheelchair and frail. And if there's a legacy that I can pass on, right? How awesome would that be?
Yeah.
And he says, do you remember me? And I said, I'm sorry, I have to be honest and say I don't. He said, do you remember when you were 15 and you had that 19-year-old girlfriend? I said, oh, the one that was married. He said, yeah, her. I was one of the two brothers y'all used to pick up after school every day when you were hanging out with her. I want to be just like you when I grow up. And I was crushed because I realized that what he envied was the worst part of me. What he wanted to emulate was not the better part of me, it was the worst part of me.
Wow.
And if I could go back now and meet him again and meet the pastor again, I'd be like, there's such...
I hope you enjoyed this. You can catch the rest of this interview right here or by going to BibleRevival.tv. Go check it out.